Cracking down on Islamist extremism, the French president orders a Paris mosque to close and the disbandment of a pro-Hamas group. The investigation into teacher Samuel Paty's murder continues. 7 people will appear before a judge this Wednesday. As a second wave of COVID cases spreads across much of Europe, countries are responding with fresh restrictions. We bring you a report from Belgium, where many screening centres are overstretched. And with clashes ongoing in Nagorno-Karabakh after 2 failed ceasefires, hundreds of people have fled the fighting. France 24 reporters meet some of the displaced. Hello and welcome back. I'm Ellen Gainsford. We begin with the latest on the investigation into the murder of teacher Samuel Paty. 9 out of 16 people being held for questioning have been released, while 7 are set to go before a judge this Wednesday. With France still reeling in the wake of Friday's terror attack, Emmanuel Macron is cracking down on radical Islamism in the country. The French president is dissolving a group with links to a high-profile Islamist. Let's take a listen to what he had to say after holding a meeting of anti-Islamism, an anti-Islamism police cell.
Our people must be protected, and our fellow citizens of Islamic faith must be protected in our country against radical Islam. Because Islamists' aim is to get part of our people to turn against our republic by using their religion. And we shall not allow this.
A mosque in Pantin, a suburb in the north of Paris, is to be shut for 6 months because of its apparent extremist attitudes. The mosque is said to have shared a video criticising history teacher Samuel Paty before his murder. Sharon Gaffney has a story.
Police posting an order to shut down a mosque in the suburb of Pantin, northeast of Paris. The place of worship is to close for 6 months from Wednesday evening. It's accused of inciting hatred and of potentially facilitating an act of terrorism. The mosque disseminated a video on Facebook days before the killing of Samuel Paty, denouncing the school teacher for showing pupils a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad during a class on freedom of expression. The closure of the mosque has caused dismay amongst those who worship there.
It's sad, it's a shame for the whole community, for the city, for everyone, for all Muslims.
Authorities believe the imam of the mosque has links to the Salafist movement and say its head, Mohamed Anish, is known for his radical Islamist views. Mr. Anish claimed on French radio that the religious beliefs of the imam had changed.
We have worked together. I've explained to him that we must move towards a more inclusive form of Islam. So he's evolved a lot over the past 5 or 6 years.
This law professor says the alleged extremism of the imam and the online broadcast of the video would not be enough to warrant the permanent closure of the mosque.
If the video is the only element, it would be difficult to legally justify closing the mosque. On the other hand, it's different if, for example, during the police search, they find materials or documents that suggest Islamist radicalization, incitement to hatred, or incitement to commit terror attacks.
The mosque has 2 months to appeal the decision to an administrative tribunal.
Now for the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. Here in France, there were more than 20,000 new cases on Tuesday. This after the tally had dipped on Monday to just over 13,000 new infections. The worst affected areas of the country, including the Paris region, are under a strict 9 p.m. curfew to help control the spread of the virus. This after cases had skyrocketed. Last week saw France saw 5 days with more than 20,000 new infections per day and 2 days with more than 30,000. While Belgium is also experiencing a second uptick in cases. In Wallonia, the French-speaking southern region of the country, cases are going through the roof. Testing areas are swamped, and authorities now say that only people with symptoms are allowed to be tested. France 24's Alex Le Bourdin and Dave Keating have this report.
This screening centre has only been open for 2 hours, but the staff is already overstretched.
C'est demain à 7h30, mais c'est mieux de venir à 7h. Il y en a qui dorment ici sur le parking à minuit.
They're unable to admit all patients, even those who show COVID symptoms.
Je me sens faible, j'ai les amygdales gonflées, alors mon médecin traitant m'a conseillé de faire tester.
But for this young man, there will be no test today, like dozens of other patients, even though they can test up to 800 people per day here.
Nous voulons arriver à 24 heures de résultats et donc on ne peut pas en faire plus par jour. Là, c'est humainement et logistiquement, ce n'est pas possible. Mais sinon, je pense qu'on pourrait rester ouvert 24 heures sur 24.
The hospital had sought to prepare for the second wave by recruiting staff like Delphine, an independent nursing contractor hired in September.
C'est la catastrophe, je pense, pour le moment, aussi bien ici que dans les hôpitaux. C'est vraiment très difficile. Donc voilà, on essaye de tenir le coup.
In the neighboring hospital, tests are only done by appointment. The staff were no longer able to respond to all requests.
Ça devenait un travail trop sous pression pour nous. Et en même temps, au moins, les gens attendent moins longtemps, sont moins agressifs.
It's an alarming situation, which does not surprise Professor Misset. Since September, he has been watching the figures with trepidation and already feared for his patients suffering from other conditions.
On a cru qu'on allait pouvoir conserver cette activité, mais comme lors de la première vague, on est obligé de commencer à diminuer. Alors on a déjà même bien commencé. On était à peine en train d'écluser ceux qui n'avaient pas été faits pendant la première vague. Or, la deuxième va être beaucoup plus longue.
The other problem is that Liège University Hospital is facing this second wave with 20% less medical staff. Most are off sick, having contracted COVID-19.
Now to the lockdown showdown in the UK, where talks have failed between Boris Johnson and the Mayor of Manchester. The British Prime Minister is to overrule Andy Burnham, imposing tough new restrictions from this Friday. Manchester will be considered Tier 3, that's the highest restriction level. Burnham says that the measures unfairly affect society's poorest. Boris Johnson has struggled with his plans to localise COVID restrictions, with regional authorities pushing back against further lockdowns out of a concern for businesses. Now for the latest from the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. The area is internationally recognised as a part of Azerbaijan, but it's populated by ethnic Armenians. Both Armenia and Azerbaijan lay claim to it. So far, 2 internationally brokered ceasefires have failed to hold. With people pouring out of the region as fighting continues, many of the displaced are heading to Goris in eastern Armenia. Our reporters Luke Shrego and Tarek Kai have this report.
A touch of innocence, while back home a conflict rages. Living just south of Nagorno-Karabakh's de facto capital of Stepanakert, Diana fled the breakaway republic with her family as the fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan grew increasingly bitter.
Նորմալ պայմաններ չկային, հետագործում էին անընդհատ։ Համարյա ամեն օր 3 օր մնացինք որ նկողում, 2 օր անընդհատ հետագործություններ, աթեստները մեր գլխավերևով թռչում էին ու չգիտես ու չես կարող ասես որ պահին որոպեին կարան հենց քո բնակավարի, քո տան վրա այդ ռումբը գցեն, կյանքի մահվան հարցեր ուղղակի։
Thousands of others had the same idea, often leaving husbands, fathers and brothers to fight on the front. Women and children headed for safety over the border in Armenia. The town of Goris opened its doors to those who were starting to flood in. Normally a tourist town of some 20,000 people, refugees now account for at least 10% of the population. The Khorezor hotels take it in around 30 of them.
Nous sommes levés, on a su qu'il y a la guerre. Donc, comme c'est une petite ville, on a organisé tout ça très rapidement. On nous a téléphoné pour demander si nous pouvons accueillir les gens. Et bien sûr, notre réponse était formative, que oui, nous pouvons leur accueillir et ils peuvent rester combien ils veulent.
That Goris has at least 30 hotels is fortunate for Nagorno-Karabakh's displaced. Not all stay, moving on to elsewhere in Armenia where possible. But many wish to remain close to the border and their relatives who are still at the front, and that means space has to be found. Often it's a makeshift arrangement, like here at this nursery, where the elderly now make a stark contrast to its youthful decor, and the numbers have only gone up.
Մեկը մեկի բարիկա մինաբերում առանց համայն կապիտալան ես եմ զանգում տեղյակ պահում մենք շատերը արդեն լսել են որ մանկապարտիզան ընդունում է առանց համայն կապիտալան գալիս են այստեղ ես եմ զանգում որ 5 հոգի ընդունեցի 8 հոգի ընդունեցի կամ այս կամավոր վարորդները ժամը 12-ին քաղաքում տեսել են մարդիկ պայուսակները ձեռքներին հյուրանոց չեն գտնում բերել են
Nearly a month into the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the strain for those who've lost their homes is becoming ever harder. As hopes here that the international community will finally be able to stop the conflict recede a little more each day.
And finally, success for NASA, whose spacecraft is playing tag with an asteroid. After a 4-year journey, its robot has touched down to collect rock and dust samples to bring back to Earth for analysis. The mission is scheduled to come home in September 2023. Well, the material could give scientists a glimpse into the dawn of our solar system. NASA believes the asteroid was formed 4.5 billion years ago. Well, that's all from me for now. Stay with us on France 24. There's more world news coming up.